Welcome to episode number 195 of the Marine Layer podcast. We welcome on Luke Arkins, the creator of the Mariners Consigliere newsletter. We chat with him about the offseason, the Mariners' 2025 expectations, and how he got into covering the team. We'll also discuss if Jeff Passan was subtweeting the Mariners earlier this week, and we'll wrap up the 2024 year for us, the Marine Layer podcast.
Quick reminder, guys, before we start the show, do us a big favor if you're listening to these episodes. If you're on the audio side, download these podcasts. It really does help if you do. Make sure to rate, review, leave it 5 stars. Keep leaving those reviews, guys. We want to see those reviews get up as high as possible for as many reviews as we can possibly get, and we really like reading them. So it does help the podcast a bunch if you do that, and we're just trying to get our ratings and reviews up. So help us out. If you're on YouTube, best way you can support the channel, please hit that subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds. It's free, easy, and it's the best way you can support us over on YouTube. Make sure to like the video, drop a comment, all that good stuff. And then if you're on social media, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube Shorts, and Blue Sky. We post content every day at Marine Layer Pod.
Let's get it rolling.
The pitch from Masataka. A drive deep to right field. Down the line. The Mariners win this game 2-1. The dream lives. They're going to the playoffs. 1-1 from Jansen. There you go. Left field. We got a tie ball game. Julio. Oh, baby, what a moment. Tie ball game at 7-7.
And we welcome you to this episode of the Marine Layer podcast, part of the Just Baseball Podcast Network, recording on Monday afternoon, December 30th. Lyle, have the Mariners made a move yet?
Nope. No, they have not. I think they're about to go into 2025 without having made a single major league transaction.
What's the over-under on number of podcasts we record before they make a move? Is it 4.5? Is it 3.5? Is it 10.5?
I don't even know at this point. When are they going to make moves? Is their first move going to be in March at spring training?
I hope not.
The rate we're going.
Who's going to be available in March? Justin Turner, I hope.
Ty France?
Well, Ty France might be available in March. That's for sure. At least for a major league deal. Might have a minor league deal on the table.
Yeah. Maybe they're waiting until after Roki Sasaki signs, which will be very, very shortly after January 15th, if not on January 15th. But it shouldn't be that way.
It should be independent of everything else, yes. Signing Roki should be 100% independent, given that they've already gotten to Plan Z and talked about trading Luis Castillo with other teams.
And I'm not even saying the Mariners are waiting to see if they sign Roki. I'm saying they might just be waiting to see where Roki Sasaki signs, period, and see if that opens up either the Castillo trade market or some other trade markets, etc. Regardless, again, that should not be your plan.
So then I think that puts you over under 5.5 podcast episodes.
Into the new year? That sounds about right.
Yeah, from now, not including this one, 5.5 after the release of this one.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you taking?
I want to say under, but I can't confidently say under.
Some real urgency there. Man, I'll go under.
They are going to make a move before January 15th. Wow.
I hope so. They should. At some point, there's going to be some urgency shown, right?
You see? You're not confident either. You just said under, but you're like, under.
Well, this is the whole point of gambling, Lau. Like, we can be as confident as we want, but we're just playing numbers here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the numbers say that Jerry Dipoto is probably anxious trying to get a move done right now. Like, that's probably true. I don't think Jerry's sitting around being like, oh, we're good. Because there's been enough reporting out there that they have been talking about moves. They've been made offers to free agents. They just haven't chosen the Mariners, or the Mariners haven't ended up doing the trade offers they've had, which, by the way, if we want to touch on it quickly, because I don't think we talked about this on our last episode. We talked about specifically the Mariners being frustrated with the offers for Luis Castillo. I think we at least should mention that there was a concrete offer after we finished recording that episode that was reported by Mark Feinsad, and he said that the package the Red Sox were willing to do, it sounded like the Red Sox were willing to do, was Triston Casas and Masataka Yoshida, plus Yoshida's contract, which is about $56 million over the next 3 years for Luis Castillo, and the Mariners turned it down. What do you think about that?
Not great things. I'm torn. I'm torn because I cannot say this enough. You shouldn't have to trade Luis Castillo. If you're going to trade prospects to get bats. Otherwise, sign the bats. But I think we all know how that goes. So, if you are talking about the specific return you could get for a Luis Castillo trade, I'm not sure you're going to get many, at least in terms of the player return and big leaguers, that are better than this. A controllable Triston Casas with 40 homer upside and 4 years of control, and Masataka Yoshida, which, look, the guy can't field. He's not going to play the outfield. He's going to be your DH. He was a 115 WRC plus hitter last year. That is 2 above average bats you would get back at 2 positions of need. And you say no. Oh, and by the way, which you outlined so incredibly thoroughly, Tej, once that news came out on Friday, I believe. The Mariners actually save money by doing that. Not lose money. They save money by doing that trade. And they said no. They said no.
Because they weren't saving enough money. I imagine they want to save most of Luis Castillo's $24 million price tag for this upcoming season if they're going to trade him, and the seasons in the future as well. They would have saved, rough maths, they would have $6 million. They would have saved $6 million in the first year, and then let's say Casas makes 4 in his first year of ARB. They would have saved 2 the year after that. And then Castillo would have his vesting option, which his bumps up to 25. If Casas gets doubled to 8, it comes out at essentially a wash at that point. So that's, I think, the rough math on it. But the Mariners didn't feel like saving $6 million this year and adding 2 bats into their lineup would be worth it. We talked a little bit about this with Luke Arkins, and we'll save most of that for this conversation, but he was highlighting, look, if you trade for Yoshida at this point, yeah, I mean, the money is attached in this trade, but then you have essentially 3 DHs on your roster. You have Mitch Haniger, you have Mitch Garver, and you have Masataka Yoshida. That's tough from a roster management perspective. From a pure baseball perspective, if you fully wanted all 3 of those players on your roster going into 2025, that's pretty difficult. The problem is, you and I have talked about too, like, they should very much be looking into moving one of the or both of the Mitches off their roster in an attempt to save money, because the roles the Mitches could occupy in 2025 is so minute and also just not expected to be that much. Therefore, you should be looking to potentially save the money and clear up roster space. That's a big reason why you can't do this trade. And it's unfortunate because, say Mitch Haniger's not on this roster and not owed this money, and maybe Robbie Ray was instead. Then they could do this trade
with Luke.
Another reason they could do this trade, because they'd have Robbie Ray. They would have Robbie Ray in their rotation, and they could trade Luis Castillo, keep Robbie Ray, and add 2 bats.
Yeah,
in theory. Now that is not projecting out budgetary decisions at all. But like just from a player perspective on the roster, it fits better without that Robbie Ray trade happening about a year ago.
Yeah. So 2 responses to that. I'll break it up. Number 1 is, when you talk about trading the Mitches, just trade Haniger. Look, you still need a backup catcher. I don't know how much money of Garver's you'd really save by trading him, but Haniger and Yoshida are pretty similar. They are both outfielders who can't play the outfield and cannot field at this point, that would be used as DHs and hoping that their bat plays up a little bit. So if you don't want to have 2 exact same type profile guys on the roster, fine, then trade one. Go trade Haniger, attach a prospect, get his money off the books, and you just keep Garver to be your backup catcher, because somebody has to be the backup catcher. And I would still bank on Garver bouncing back more in 2025 than I would Haniger, at least to some extent.
I'm with you on that. Yeah, okay. No, I'm with you on that.
So that gives you more roster flexibility. Again, Yoshida's not an athlete. He's not a very good fielder. But if you trade Haniger, you don't have the crunch of 3 non-athletic guys on your roster who can't really be versatile and play any other positions. It's just your backup catcher, and then you have a DH, essentially.
In the current budget, you would have to, I think, shed a little bit more payroll for the Mariners to at least go into the season with all these players on the roster, but you could find a way to make that happen.
Yeah, right. Here's point number 2. Let's just call it what it is at this point. After these reports that came out about the Mariners saying no to the Triston Casas Masataka Yoshida trade for Castillo, let's call it what it is at this point. If the Mariners trade Luis Castillo, it's a salary dump. Don't call it anything else. It is a salary dump. Could they get offensive pieces back that would help them in 2025 and beyond? Sure. Could they go get young pieces to help their core moving forward, like a Kobe Mayo if the Orioles agreed to it? Sure. But it's a salary dump. Don't kid yourself. Don't fool yourself. Don't call it anything else. Luis Castillo gets traded. It's a salary dump.
It's hard to argue because if the money's even, the money would have been, again, about even or $6 million in savings while upgrading the lineup. I do think there was some variety of opinion on that trade package, which is good. I mean, I'm glad everyone thought through it and had some thoughts about how this would make the Mariners roster better or worse. And there were plenty of people that thought the loss of Castillo in the rotation would be greater than the addition of 2 bats in the lineup, which is, again, that's totally fine. From a baseball perspective, I think it's up in the air whether or not it was a good trade idea or not. I would have done the trade. I'll speak for you. I think you also would have done the trade given the current situation of what the Mariners in and what they've shown the resources they're willing to put into the roster at this point and what's going to be available in the future. I feel like that's something you have to do. And the window of this next season and the couple of seasons after that is your window to go win games. And given the fact you won't be able to afford to keep some of your best players on it, it's just not a guarantee after even 2025 that you're going to have the full core intact and therefore have the ability to have a roster good enough where a trade like this would have enough of an impact to push you over the top. Because say the same offer was offered next season, Lyle, does it quite hit the same if you have to trade Logan Gilbert to save money and you add 2 bats in the lineup? It's like, oh, well, then we're losing Luis Castillo and Logan Gilbert going into next season. Oh, and all of the rest of these guys are getting more expensive as well, so we don't really have the budget to upgrade. That doesn't quite hit the same at this point.
No.
Where, sure, this trade and the players will be on your roster beyond next season, but as I've said multiple times, the only season that matters is next season. That's the only season that should matter. I don't care about 2026. I don't care about 2027. I don't care what the money's going to look like in 2029. That's completely irrelevant because, like, if things don't work out, it's a very realistic possibility there are going to be new decision makers in place to worry about that 2029 money. So why should the current people in place have to worry about that at this point?
And why should fans care about the 2029 money? Spoiler, they shouldn't. Let me just say this to your point about would you do that Castillo trade or not. Here's how I'd phrase it for me. I'd do it, but I'd be very unhappy about it. And I say that because they should not have to resort to trading out of their freaking rotation. That's what it's about. So to answer your question, I would do it, but I wouldn't be happy about it.
It's a desperation trade is what it is to upgrade your lineup given what you have available. Right, desperation. But the Mariners should be desperate right now. If they're not desperate right now, then I'd seriously be questioned about what the direction is. Because like the reality sets in that you've made the playoffs one time in 9 years with this regime in place. There is immense fan pressure. It's not like people are reaching when the people say how angry they are watching what the Mariners are doing and the resources they're putting into this and being like, oh, I'm sure the fans will show up anyways. Are you sure? Are you sure? Like, it doesn't take much to go read some of the sentiment online. While it can be a cesspool, I do feel like more and more and more people are reaching to the point where they don't want to go watch Mariner games this upcoming year. And it's due to, like, they don't feel like the team is putting everything possible forward to go out there and go win. And a little bit of desperation would show that. And again, desperation, it's not usually a win-win trade. You're doing something as a gamble in a hope that it pays off this upcoming season, in a hope that you piece together Castillo's rotation spot with, say, Emerson Hancock and Logan Evans for the entire season, and they put up like a 105 ERA plus or something, like good enough as a 5-starter that can get you through the entire season and then get you into the playoffs, so that 5-starter doesn't matter at all. It's just an extra spot in the bullpen. And saying, okay, well, the risk paid off because our lineup now is significantly better because we added those 2 bats into it. Just something like that people want to see. It's like, oh, okay, like it's risk-taking season.
Right. But if you trade Luis and Brian Wu gets hurt, or if you trade Luis and George Kirby gets hurt, whoever, rotation gets real thin, real fast. For the love, for like, good Lord, just sign the bats. They won't, but just sign the bats. Anyway, we've spent some time on this. Speaking of direction of a franchise, which you just mentioned, somebody called out the direction of a lot of franchises this week, and that would be the voice of reason, the voice of the people, Jeff Passan.
Let's give him a round of applause. Shout out to Jeff Passan.
Woo! Passan fired me up with that tweet. Let's go, Passan. We need more of that. We need more people not afraid to say what Jeff said. Thank you, Jeff.
So this was right after Teoscar signed.
It was.
Right? Yeah.
Would you like me to read the word for word of the tweet from Passan?
Sure thing. So just the context, Teoscar Hernandez signed with the Dodgers a few days ago, 3 years, $66 million. And people were like, oh, how can the Dodgers keep doing this? How do they? And more money was deferred in that contract, which is just the most hilarious thing ever, that the Dodgers are just like, yeah, we'll worry about that in the future. No big deal. So Teoscar signed a new deal. People were talking about it, and Passan said...
He said, the Los Angeles Dodgers are a machine. Not only do they print cash, their willingness to spend it in pursuit of winning is unmatched. They put their money where their mouth is. And then he goes for the kill, Jeff Passan. Others could benefit greatly from the same approach. They choose not to.
Wah, wah, wah. So who's he talking about, Lyle?
Oh, it's tough to say. It's tough to say who he could be really just closing his eyes, envisioning as he types out that tweet. It is real tough to say. You know, there's a few teams he could be rattling off there. He could be talking about the Red Sox. He could be talking about the Cubs. He could be talking about the A's, who moved out of a major market just so they didn't have to spend money. But within that conglomerate is absolutely 150% the Seattle Mariners.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Listen, let's say this. There was some pushback to Passan about this tweet from some deranged fans, I guess, which I don't know how any fans out there are defending owners and billionaires. That's not how fandom works. You don't defend your owners. Not unless you're the Dodgers and they do amazing, amazing things to satisfy their fan base and, like Passan said, go all out to win. Not unless you're the Phillies. Not unless you're the Mets. Not unless you're teams like that. Who are these people out there trying to defend owners? That's number one.
So so there was a lot of people who were like, well, not every team can do this, Jeff.
So yeah, right. And that's what I was going to get to. And we can hash this out here. What I was going to say is, can every team spend like the Dodgers? Of course not. Should teams be putting out a made-up, self-imposed $15 million budget when they're in a contention window? No. That's what Passan's saying. Jeff Passan's not telling the Mariners to go spend like the Dodgers. He wouldn't say no if they did. We certainly wouldn't say no if they did. Nobody in this Mariners fan base would. But to do what they are currently doing is what Jeff Passan is calling out, what we've been calling out forever, what this entire fan base has been calling out. Stop operating like this. It's a joke.
So I want to see how I want to go about this. So, Jeff, yes, to all of your points, the Mariners are 100% in the top 5, if not the top 2, if not number 1 of what Jeff Passan is talking about here in this very tweet, and very well should be. If you're contending, you should be trying. If you're rebuilding, I don't think anyone cares whether or not you're spending or wasting money or not. When you're winning, and especially when you're coming up short in the way the Mariners have, And a big reason of it is that you just don't have enough invested in your roster in terms of everyday players and consistency and da-da-da-da-da-da. Absolutely applies. So here's where the Mariners and the Dodgers are different. The Dodgers are owned by a multi-billion-dollar investment firm, essentially. They are worth, I think, hundreds of billions of dollars, that investment group. So, yeah, Mariners are not on the same footing there. Their television deal is worth $8.3 billion. Do you want me to repeat that number? $8.3 billion. They make, on average, I think, from their television deal, $250 million a year. So,
right.
Not every team can match that. And that's 100% true.
Yes.
But, as we've talked about a couple times, just because you don't make the money doesn't mean you cannot acquire the money. The Padres went in an all-in chase for a World Series the last few years. They didn't have the same revenue as the Dodgers. It's been clearly noted, and we've seen the fallout from what has happened with the Padres, how much money they had to borrow just to finance some of the payroll they've had on their roster. But when push came to shove, they pushed all their chips in for a couple of seasons, and they made it all the way to the NLCS. A couple of different things go their way. They could have ended up in the World Series competing for that trophy. Didn't end up happening, but they gave themselves a chance. I think what people like Passan are saying is that because you put these restrictions on yourself, you're not giving yourself a chance. You're not trying to force the issue. You're trying to luck into the issue, which is essentially what the Mariners are doing right now. They're probably hoping their roster luckily comes all together at once and has an amazing season and goes on a run to the American League Championship Series. Mm-hmm. What is not sustainable is luck. And a team that has been about as unlucky as any franchise in Major League Baseball should not be relying on that said metric.
No.
Seriously.
No. Here's the difference. Is anybody, Passan included, saying the Mariners, given their revenue and what their revenue says that they make, is anybody saying next offseason they need to go out and give Shohei $700 million? Well, they should have done that, but I'm gonna rattle off a list of names here. You give $700 million to Shohei, and then $325 to Yamamoto, then you trade for and give Glasnow a big extension, then you bring back Teoscar, and then you sign Blake Snell, and then you've got Mookie on the books, you got Freddie Freeman on the books, you've got everybody on the books. Is anybody saying that's the expectation for every team in Major League Baseball, the Mariners included? No. But let's highlight this again. When David Samson was on with us, right? What did he say? He said, what I was taught by Bud Selig was, if your payroll gets to 50% of your revenue, that's when you start to get in the murky area of losing money. So, to use that metric, and by the way, this isn't us sitting here saying, oh, listen to what this blogger said. Listen to what this media person said. Listen to what this YouTuber said. No. This is somebody in David Samson who used to be the president of a baseball team and sit in ownership meetings, then say to us, here's what the commissioner of baseball said to me. That is as reliable a source as you could possibly cook up here in terms of here is reliable information. This is the former commissioner of baseball uttering these words. You think he doesn't know? Oh, he knows. He says you get to 50%, that's when you start to potentially lose money. I'm not saying those Forbes lists are exactly right, but they cannot be hundreds of millions of dollars off. And what Forbes said is the Mariners racked in nearly $400 million, $395 million. So if their payroll was 50% of that, or we can even take it down a little bit because 50% is 197. If they were at 190, they were at 185. That puts them in the 11 to 13 range, which is exactly what people are asking.
Or just think about how different the offseason would be if it was $175 million.
Yes.
Pretty immensely different.
Yeah, with $175 million instead of the 150 to 155 they're working with right now, you could go and sign
Christian Walker and you trade for Brandon Lau, and then you figure out third base.
Great.
That's it. People would have been happy with that offseason.
People would have been more than thrilled. I'm not saying people would look at this team and say they won the offseason. now they're the World Series favorites, but they would have been set up in a very, very good position to be competitive in 2025. People would have come into the season excited. And you know what? They still can. This offseason is not totally over. But things like this is what Jeff Passan's saying. If you were to ask Jeff what he means for each specific team by that tweet, by what he said, he'd probably give you a slightly different answer for every franchise based on where they're at revenue-wise. And for the Mariners, I bet you he'd say something similar to what we're saying. Unfortunately, Jeff does not own the Seattle Mariners. Maybe he should.
Well, he makes a lot of money at ESPN, so eventually he's got to make enough money to at least get himself on the board.
Great. Be the voice of reason, Passan. We need you. We need you. How can we sales pitch you to do it? Think of it as a charity project, buddy. Think about how many people you could bring joy to by being on that board, sitting in these meetings and just like ripping these people apart. It's like let's not even say what I really want to say. Just like you delusional people, this is not how you operate.
Well, we'll cross our fingers. We'll hold out hope, and we'll hope this message gets to Jeff Passan so we can start thinking about his post-news breaking days, where he thinks about reviving one of the worst franchises in American sports. So think about that, Jeff. Please and yes. Thank you.
Right. But he's right. Just to wrap this up, he's right. Again, not everybody can spend like the Dodgers, but everybody could do significant, like the teams he's talking about could be doing significantly more than what they're doing. If you even want to spend 60 seconds away from the Mariners, if he's talking about the Red Sox, they should be spending way more. Market like Boston shouldn't be 11th to 12th in Major League Baseball payroll. Cubs, trade away the whole core of your team instead of trying to keep it together and haven't done much sense in terms of investing in your roster. Market like Chicago, haven't done it. So there's teams that should be doing a lot more. Don't even get us started on teams like the A's, the Pirates, etc.
Yeah.
But the Mariners, no one's asking you to be third in payroll. For the love of God, get to 11th or 12th because it would give you so much more flexibility to make actual impact moves to this team. All right, before we get to Luke Arkins, let's take a quick pause here. We want to talk to you guys about our awesome friends over at Pagach's Pub 85. That's over in Kirkland. You guys know, you've heard us say it, we'll continue to say it. Such an awesome place to go hang out with your friends, have some great food, play some games, watch sports. Hey, college football playoff coming up here on New Year's Day. NFL playoffs right around the corner. Oh, forks up. Go Devils.
Yeah.
Oh, they're going to win. Anyway, you want an awesome spot to go watch some games and hang out with your friends? Head over there. And if you go during happy hour, those drink specials are as good as you'll find. $3 and $4, you guys. 2 to 6 p.m., $3 and $4 happy hour drinks. All of that. Great food, games, sports watching, hanging out with your friends. All of that is over at Pagach's Pub 85 in Kirkland.
We had a good chat with Luke Arkins earlier today, the creator of the Mariners Consigliere newsletter. You find him on Twitter. He gives out some of the most informational and interesting Mariners articles, Mariners stats throughout the season and throughout the offseason as well. Lyle and I have read his stuff for a while, followed him on Twitter for a while. He usually is right because, as he explained to us, loves to use numbers in his writing and his analysis to come to conclusions on players, and thought he'd be a really interesting person to have on. And as I've said, like, we always look for new people to have on. And now that we're almost 200 episodes into this, I feel like we've had a good chunk of people on. Luke has not been one of those people yet, so it was good to get him on for the first time.
Yeah, he was great. Just like how we followed Jason Churchill forever, and now Jason's been a recurring guest to the podcast. Similar with Luke, when TJ and I really, really got into baseball, and well, we got into baseball when we were the youngest of ages, but once we got on Twitter and started using Twitter to learn even more about baseball, Luke was absolutely one of the people we followed at a very, very early point, and we followed him ever since. We love all his work. He's really smart, and we got a chance to have him on the podcast, and it was great. So hopefully you guys enjoy the interview because he really knows his stuff. It was interesting to have a new voice, and yeah, I continue to always really value what he says because he knows what he's talking about.
So with that, we won't keep you any longer. Let's get you to the interview with Luke Arkins.
All right, we've got Luke Arkins on with us. He is the founder and writer of Mariners Consigliere. You can find that over on Substack. He also does a ton of great work over on Twitter, where you can find him everywhere, talking Mariners, breaking down analytics, etc., just talking baseball in general. He's been an awesome follow for years. TJ and I have certainly followed him forever. Luke, thanks so much for coming on. How has this offseason treated you so far on your end?
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It is a weird offseason. It's certainly for Jerry Dipoto during his time here. Really inactive. I know that the Mariners like to consider the trade deadline prior to the offseason as part of what they do in the offseason. So I guess you could look back and say, well, they picked up Randy Arozarena. Of course, Justin Turner has left. But when you look at what they've done since the season end, it is really nothing other than Austin, what's his name? Austin Schenter or whatever his name is, Shelton, right?
Shenton from the Rays.
The kid from Bellingham, right? So yeah, it really is perplexing. I know they're kind of tight on money and all that, but it really is sort of a surprising situation. And perhaps maybe the market has changed through the years now with more teams being in the postseason hunt and later in the season, maybe just the way teams are going at arbitration, qualifying offer, and all the other things that lead up to trades. Maybe that's part of why it's so slow. Perhaps it also has to do with what the team is looking for and what they're not willing to give up.
It doesn't feel like, though, it's just money at this point, which is causing inaction. I mean, and you detailed a couple of reasons there, but I mean, they've shown they have put offers out there. I mean, it was reported they offered Carlos Santana. It's been shown they've at least talked to other teams about Luis Castillo, and yet somehow there still hasn't been a move. Is there a reason you feel like that is pressing out among the others as the reason they're not doing anything?
Well, I think Santana is probably just a guy near the end of his career who wants to go back to where he started. I don't think it really had anything to do with the Mariners per se. As far as I do think money is part of it. I mean, when you look back at last offseason, I always point to the Mitch Haniger, Robbie Ray trade. I mean, why would you trade Robbie Ray? Okay, he's down for the year, so what? I mean, would the Mets or the Yankees or Dodgers trade him? Of course not. They would keep him so that if he comes back late in the season, you have that guy. And if not, then you'll have him for seasons afterwards. So why would you trade him? But because they were so tight on money, they bring back an aging player who they're familiar with and who doesn't perform. And now they're hamstrung by his salary this year, despite all the savings of letting Robbie Ray go for, like on paper, yeah, they save money. But when you get into the next offseason, they don't have money. So it's really, I think really money is a lot of what is driving it. I think when you look at the rumor that the Red Sox are interested in Castillo, but they wanted to send Yoshida back, I think it really just comes down to the dollars and cents. The Mariners don't want to pick up a guy who's pretty much a DH, who's making, I think, $18 million a year. So the Mariners wouldn't gain the savings that they would if they could just push Castillo off and not take much money back.
So, actually, you make a good point there, Luke, about Robbie Ray. So let me circle back to that here. And obviously, you can play the whole domino effect game if you want to and say, well, if you don't trade Robbie Ray, is Brian Wu as far along? Is Bryce Miller far along? Like, people can play that game, sure. But to your point, I think if the Mariners were in a position now where they still had Robbie Ray in the fold rather than Mitch Haniger, and they decided they needed to trade an arm, I think it's fair to say it would be easier to move Robbie Ray and get something back than it is to move Mitch Haniger, given how much teams are looking for starting pitching. Is that fair?
Yeah, I believe so. Or they could trade one of the younger guys.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
They'd have options. They could trade anybody they'd want. They'd be very deep. And you're right. They would have probably it would have been brought along slower. Because they've been watching his innings anyway, and he has an injury history and all that. So sure, but yeah, I just don't understand why they traded Robbie Ray. Of all the trades they made, all the moves they made last offseason, that is the one that just didn't make any sense to me. It's just not how you operate.
And you wouldn't have to go into this offseason saying that trading a starting pitcher is Plan Z, and then within a month, it seems like go in and start executing Plan Z without the full offseason even really turning over in and of itself. So like in terms of what they have, they're really limiting themselves option wise now. They would have provided themselves seriously with a lot more options if Robbie was still on the roster at this time, or at least was at the beginning of the offseason, and they could have made an acquisition. I'm curious, Luke, your thoughts about that Luis the package with the Red Sox. When it comes to Casas and Yoshida, and we say, well, the Mariners wouldn't have saved enough money on that deal for them wanting to do it. But if you get 2 bats back, though, and solve some of your issues, the savings, I feel like, should be less of an issue at that point, because you're achieving what you're trying to do, which is upgrade the team. And that will, as they've said, cost money to do so, and that hence why they've set a budget for themselves. But so I'm curious to get your take on why they wouldn't do that.
Well, it may have to do with Yoshida's a DH. He's a terrible, at least the metrics say he's a terrible outfielder. So he's your DH. He's your everyday DH. So now what do you do with Mitch Haniger? What do you do with Mitch Garver and their $30 million or so that they're making? So it doesn't really clear enough payroll per se. Probably that is probably part of it. And I think we probably would all agree moving Mitch Haniger would be difficult. Moving Mitch Garver would be he would probably be less difficult, but still difficult to move. That's what I'm assuming is what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably right. I guess what we've talked about is if you were going to move Haniger, you might have to attach a prospect to a team that's looking for prospects. But even then, it's no slam dunk, right?
Right, and what does that get you? I guess, yeah, now you can go acquire somebody else, but you're probably going to have to give up some prospects. Part of the Mariners' challenge is they don't have a lot of major league talent they can move. When you look around, they have a finite number of guys that make up their core for this coming season, and then, what else? They don't have a lot of excess that anybody would want. I mean, I don't think anybody's jumping over a barrel to get Dylan Moore, right? I mean, or Mitch Garver or Mitch Haniger. Do you want to move Randy Rosarena? Well, you can, but you create a hole in doing so. So you're not making yourself better by doing that. It's just when you look around, who would you trade? And that's part of the problem. Teams don't want to necessarily want prospects if they're trying to compete this year. Even if you can give them somebody that can work off their bench, that's quality off the bench, perhaps that would work. A backup catcher, a fourth outfield, or something. But what would the Mariners give up?
Right. And you highlighted it with Dylan Moore earlier this week on Twitter that he really, really has not hit right-handed pitching.
Right. And I don't know that. I mean, I like Dylan Moore, and my wife loved him. I love him. Yeah, I mean, she loved him, but he doesn't hit right-hand pitching well. He doesn't hit well in the ballpark. So, okay, like what's like him playing every day or being part of the solution at second base? And it's sort of funny, like people say, or it's sort of pushed out there that Ryan Bliss and Dylan Moore could possibly form a combo at second base. Well, they're both right-handed. We don't know what Bliss is. I mean, he didn't perform very well in the very short sample he had this year. And we know what Dylan Moore is. He's a good utility player. He can play a lot of spots. He can fill in. He hits left-handed pitching well, and he hits better on the road. So how does that make up a good combo at second base? It's not. And it wouldn't be any better at third base with Dylan Moore if he's playing nearly every day. And as far as his defense, it's decent. But is it great? No, it's good. So,
and he's 33, which doesn't help.
Yeah.
33, 32. Yeah, he's up there.
Yeah. He's still very athletic, though.
Yeah, which is a good thing. Would you have been in on just a Luis Castillo for Triston Casas swap? Like, would that have made sense to you?
Oh, I don't know. That's a lot. I personally, I don't believe in trading starting pitchers. I know we're sitting around talking about it. I just don't believe in it. It's your strength. It would be difficult for me to see that trade because we don't know what Casas really is. He certainly has hit well. He has had some injury issues. He strikes out a lot. He's a work in progress. You're sort of using the hope theory there by going that way.
Okay, so outline us this. You don't want to trade starting pitching, and I'm totally in that boat. The Mariners should not trade from what is the best rotation in baseball, the backbone of their team. Just go find ways to improve the offense, whether it's trading prospects, whether it's finding some way to sign a guy or two, etc. If you were to outline the Luke Arkins plan for what's left this offseason and how the Mariners really upgrade this roster to the best of their ability, what moves would you make to say this team just got meaningfully better?
Well, that's really hard because I have no money.
All right, so let's
Juan Soto.
Yo, you can sign us right up for that.
Yeah.
I said I'd give the guy $1 billion, but
Right.
it's also, it's not my money. But anyway, okay, let's do two plans. If you had money, and if you have this $15 million budget, what would you do with each of those resources?
I don't know specific names, but I think the first thing I'd do, what they should be doing all the time, is raising their floor. When you look around, like look at the Mets, the Dodgers, the Yankees, like they're not afraid to spend more money on their role players than a team like the Mariners. That's the first thing I do. Certainly you got to do something at third base. I mean, Alex Bregman would be great. There's some risk with him, but we know he's not coming here. I mean, I can tell you names who I think they should get, but I don't know that. I would have signed Christian Walker. Christian Walker would have been a guy at first base. There is some concern. He has been striking out more. He is older, but the defense should continue to be good. He just has to be average over there, and it would be an upgrade. And that's part of this. With the Mariners, you don't need to have a top 10 offense. You're probably never going to have a top 10 offense. I think they've had a top 10 or top 5 offense once in the history of T-Mobile Park, and I think it was like 2001. So
Sounds
that is
right.
probably not going to happen. So how about like being 12th or 13th? Above average, but not way above average. So you don't have to have studs. But what I also would do is I would double down on what you're good at, the pitching. I would go out and I would have acquired top-level relievers, some top-shelf guy to get in there to help Munoz, and hopefully the guys, here using the hope theory again, Matt Brash comes back, and now you have a deeper bullpen. So that's what I would do.
Would you have been a Devin Williams from the Brewers acquisition fan?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends what you have to give up for him, but yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The more arms in the bullpen, the better.
I noticed, and maybe it was just because you were just trying to list off a name or two. You didn't throw Santos into that bucket.
Santos. I couldn't think of his name, and I didn't want to stammer away. I can't remember his name. Yes, definitely. And that was a good move last offseason. It didn't work out, but that was a great move. You traded away a AAA hitter to pick up a guy who you were hoping would help you, and he got hurt. And that's just part of the deal with relief pitchers.
But you would still feel like enter 2025 with all the control he has, that he can still be the guy that they once traded for him to be.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I don't see why he won't be this year. We don't know that he will. Same thing with Matt Brash. You don't know what a guy's going to be like after Tommy John. We'll just see what he is and when he gets back and all that. But look at the Yankees. They're trying to deepen their bullpen. They know. And look at these top teams. They're all trying to add starting pitchers. So why would you trade? I understand we need more hitters here, but yeah, you just gotta have to add more talent. But you just can't. If it's not there, then do what you can. Upgrade what you can.
So in terms of doing what they can to the more realistic budget, we imagine all $15 million is still there left in the budget. What would you feel like is realistic?
Gosh, I don't know. Not a lot with what's left. It's really difficult to envision. It depends on what they can do. If they move a Mitch Garver, could they take on pay half his salary, trade him with a prospect, and open up a little bit more room. Same thing with Mitch Garver. Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's getting awfully difficult to come up with names that make sense. I was going to write about first baseman, and I just said, man, I don't want to talk about Ty France. I mean, I think, it's ironic with Ty France. I heard you guys talking the other day about him. I don't think there's any way he'd be back. For some reason, they let him go. The fact that they let him go when they did says that there was some dissatisfaction with Ty France. Now, what that would be, I don't know. But why would you let him go at that point without a replacement?
Yeah, and it is a little interesting. TJ's made the point that it feels like part of that was almost scapegoating Ty France for what was a plethora of problems within an entire offense. But part of that, too, is you're right. He is a first baseman that doesn't hit for a lot of raw power, wasn't playing great defense, obviously doesn't run all that well. And if you're not putting up numbers at a premier offensive position, sometimes that leads to a team deciding they need to move on. But yeah, what's tough about the first base market is who's left, right? I mean, obviously you can say the obvious and Pete Alonso, but I think all three of us would say that's probably not happening. And then you move on to
Justin Turner.
Right, which seems like the obvious one.
Which is it seems like what they will do at this point. If he wants to come back. He said at the beginning of the offseason he was interested. I don't know if we've heard much from Justin Turner since. So
I like Justin Turner, but Justin Turner's 40.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
At some point, players don't play as well. They get injured more, and it has to do with age. And when he's 40, he probably shouldn't be playing every day. Now, maybe you platoon him with Luke Raley. That's okay. But would that be enough plate appearances to satisfy Justin Turner, who might be in the final year of his career? Does he want to just be against a platoon guy against left-handed pitching in Seattle? I don't know.
That's a good question. Are we putting unnecessary pressure here on Luke Raley? I feel like with how the first base market has come out, it came from Luke Raley being an idea at first base, where it's like, oh, well, this is an option for us. We know he had a really good season last year, till at this point it's like, oh, man, you should probably be taking a lot of first base reps this offseason. No pressure.
I think he'll be fine, personally. I think he would be fine. I mean, I think you should look at the way they're set up right now. Of the three positions, first base, second, third, I would put first as the third priority because they have a guy. They have a left-handed hitter. About 80% of the league is right-handed pitching, so he's going to play nearly every day. And don't worry about the left-handed pitcher. That's what Dylan Moore can do. So, that's. I don't know. I worry too much about it. But second base is to me a hole, and so is third base. That is those two positions. You got to do something there. You don't have anything that's acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't.
No.
Well, what about the defense aspect of what Raley could do at first base? It was fine, I think.
Well, fine is. I mean, what is? First base defense is so hard to gauge anyway. I mean, I'm sure he'll be fine. I mean, if Ty France hit, if you hit at first base, nobody cares about your defense unless you just don't. Unless you just have the mobility of a statue, nobody cares.
Sure. Okay, so staying on this topic here, because we're talking about Luke Raley, and now we're kind of in the conversation of what you could call some Tier 2 players on the offense, some auxiliary players on the offense is the word TJ used, in terms of the less bats you add, the more that gets put on the shoulders of the guys that are already on the roster. And somebody you just wrote about recently and have talked a decent amount about, which is Victor Robles, feels like he falls into that category. A guy who was the surprise of all surprises last year for the Mariners, had an unbelievable year after they picked him up, really spark-plugged an offense that needed a shot of life. They give him the small extension. But with all of this, if they're not going to go out impact at first, second, and or third, more gets put on the top of that lineup, which is, it's Robles, it's Randy, it's Julio, it's Cal, etc. Is that fair pressure to now put on Victor Robles? And also, writing what you wrote this week, do you feel like what he did last year can sustain to some level in 2025?
Well, like I said, I'm going to take a wait-and-see approach with Victor Robles. I'm rooting for the guy, but he hasn't done it over a sustained period of time. I mean, he did hit extremely well at T-Mobile Park, which is always a plus. But he played out of his mind in September. I mean, the only hitter better in September was Shohei Ohtani. I mean, can we expect him to repeat that? Probably not. He's a good runner. We know that. I mean, other than his one oopsie daisy at third base with Justin Turner at the plate, but other than that, he was exceptionally good on the bases. He's a decent defender. He can play all three outfield positions. That's a good guy to have on your team. Now, whether he should be the fourth outfielder or a starting right fielder, I don't know. I guess we're going to find out because it looks like the Mariners are satisfied with their outfield position.
Mm-hmm.
I think what worries me the most about Robles, less of the offensive year-over-year continuance that he brings over from last season, because I think at this point the Mariners want J.P. Crawford to bounce back as well and sort of retake that leadoff spot. I think the 2023 version of J.P. Crawford, or even 80 to 90% of it in that leadoff spot, is about as valuable as it could possibly get, given everything he brought to that position. So that would put, I think, less of a weight on Victor Robles' shoulders. The problem is Robles has had issues staying healthy in his career, and once he goes down, that's a hypothetical. If he goes down this upcoming season, then you have a pinch where essentially you're going to now ask your first baseman to go back out into the outfield and play, and that leaves you empty-handed at first. And as the Mariners have done, I think year over year, it's been, Dylan Moore will solve this issue. But as we've talked about, this forces Dylan Moore into a position that is not his strength. And, well, I don't think that benefits the Mariners quite as much. But, Luke, if I remember correctly from your article, you weren't quite as worried with the injuries for Victor Robles. Do I have that right?
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I forget what injury he had earlier this season. He had an injury with the Nationals before he joined the Mariners. Mostly back and hamstring, I think, or what was his issues. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, you could always call up a Cade Marlowe or somebody like that if it's a short-term injury. You just deal with it. I mean, every team deals with losing players. I mean, if you commit to Luke Riley at first base, then he's a first baseman who might run out in the outfield. Maybe if Justin Turner's playing first base, and you may run out Rayleigh out in the outfield or something like that, or if Julio goes down or somebody else hopefully doesn't go down, but if he does, if somebody else is down, you might shift a little bit, but I think he's your first baseman. You leave him there and you deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about year-over-year offensive production, back to the first part of what I just asked, what about J.P. Crawford? Where on the J.P. Crawford dial from 2023 to 2024 would you want this 2025 season to be or expect?
I would be pleased if he averaged what he did in like 21 and 22, sort of an on-base guy, not a lot of slug. I'd be happy with that. If he is a 340 OBP, I'd be happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
But, if he does what he did in 23, that'd be awesome. I know I saw a video yesterday. He was down at Driveline, so hopefully he's trying to work on a few things. He just had a rough year. It started off rough. He got hurt, and it's just tough to come back and get back in sync. So it's tough to know what he'll be this coming year. But he has to hit. I mean, he's slightly above average at shortstop. He's not an elite defender. It's not like at least he feels well. And he's okay. So he has to hit, or else it really is sort of a drag.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're talking about player. I mean, you talked about JP's on base percentage and what he could be come 2025, and you said some version of 21 to 22, which was about a 105 WRC plus hitter roughly. And I bring that in because new age numbers and some of the advanced metrics is not foreign to you. You talk about it plenty on social media when you try to outline points that you're making for fans to view and read when they're looking at your work. And not everybody does that, especially not everybody a generation, I'd say, ahead of us. Some people just don't want any part of the new age analytics, but you're really invested in it, which I love. So how did you kind of get bought into that idea and say, yeah, all this stuff's important?
Well, I'm at least a generation ahead of you guys, so generation ahead of me, they've probably got a foot in the grave. But I don't know. I'm just trying to find ways to better understand stuff and to compare things. And the advanced metrics do that. It doesn't. People say, well, batting average doesn't matter anymore. Well, it does matter. It's just not everything. If you gauge somebody just by their batting average, you're probably either underestimating or overestimating their value. And things like WRC plus, OPS plus, those are park-adjusted metrics. They're just a great way to compare players. And then things like hard hit rate, barrel rate, I like those things because they're result-driven. You hit the ball hard, you barreled it with quality. That just makes it a lot easier to understand what somebody is doing. Because sometimes we know that guys hit the ball right at let's say a right-handed hitter, he hits a screaming line drive to third base and it's an out. But as observers of the game should look at it and say, hey, he did well. The hitter did well. He made out, but he took a good swing and it worked out, and perhaps next time it will. So that's why I like advanced metrics.
And I'm glad you highlighted at least a portion of that as park adjusted, because that's so important when it comes to evaluating Mariners offense, since they play in such an offensively suppressant ballpark. And I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier when you were talking about the Mariners offense, that they only need to have a top 15 offense in baseball and they should be fine. Slightly better. Yeah, or slightly better, yes, which they were this past year by, when we do a park-adjusted stat like WRC+, I believe they were 12th. What's puzzling to me always is that what we talk about that, and we look at the Mariners the past 3 seasons, they've been, I think, 12th, 6th, and 9th in WRC+ the last 3 years, and yet people have been scratching and clawing about why the offense still isn't good enough. So when you see a number evaluated like that, how do you sort of pick through and see, okay, here's where the flaws of this is, and here's where it really, really shines?
Well, so park-adjusted stats are not necessarily the best thing to use when you're trying to gauge a team's offense, because what matters most is how many runs you average per game. And so, or how many runs, because that's what it takes to win games, is to score runs. And so park-adjusted stats take into account that you play in a pitcher's park for half your season, but that doesn't help you when you're trying to score runs every night. I think that's part of it. I mean, to me, you want to be, for a season, if you can be 10th to 12th in runs scored, I think you're in pretty good shape. And I wouldn't look at the WRC. I just don't think it's a good way to look at a team or an individual player as far as their performance goes. Are they doing their job, or yes or no? Like J.P. Crawford, like he's 5% at 105 WRC plus or OPS plus. He's 5% above the league. That probably makes some sense. But when you look at the Mariners as a whole, does that make sense? I don't think it's a good idea to gauge teams with that stat.
Yeah, I'm in that boat. I like to use it more for the players than the teams, for every reason you just outlined. Last one I've got for you, Luke, is, as somebody like you who's not from here, they moved here. You've lived here about 15 years now, but you are as ingrained in the Mariners as anybody these days. How'd you get into it?
Well, as far as how did I get into Mariners, I married a Mariners fan. So, I mean, on our first date, she had to tell me all about the night they traded Randy Johnson to the Diamondbacks, and how she told me at the time, don't tell anybody, but I cried. Then I found out she told other people the same thing. But and that's sort of how it started for me. I just I'm a Met fan. I still root for the Mets, but I watch every Mariners game. I watch most of the Mets games, parts of the Mets games, but I'm a Mariners fan. And so she got me into it. And then as far as writing, I was still active duty, and I remember I used to hear Jason Churchill. He would do a segment with Steve Sandmeyer on 1090 back, I don't know when it was, probably 12 years ago or so. I don't remember now. And I thought, this guy's kind of interesting. And then I started following on Twitter. And then he became a regular on the show. And I remember him tweeting out that he was looking for people to write at Prospect Insider. And I remember I was laid up with a broken ankle. I was going to be leaving the service in about 10 months. And I remember being at home in bed with this broken ankle and just tweeting at him and saying, hey, I'd like to write for Prospect Insider at some point. And so he said, okay. And I said, I'll get with you when I can. And so a year later or so, I reached out and I met him, and that's how I started writing. And so then a couple of years ago, I started the newsletter, sort of venture out on myself, and that's kind of my story.
And how do you feel like, last thing for me, Luke, how do you feel like your writing and your storytelling has evolved? Like, what point have you gotten to of like, this is the story I'm trying to tell with this?
Well, initially I was sort of I think I wrote more opinion than anything, and then it sort of evolved, and at some point I kind of leaned back on my life in the Navy, where I like to be fact driven, results driven, and so I started to lean more on numbers and metrics and things like that. And now I think that's pretty much. And what I like about it is it takes the emotion out of it a little bit, because the facts, the numbers are the numbers. And a lot of times, like Robles, I write the thing about Robles and I point out these numbers, and people can agree or disagree. They could tell me they don't like my numbers, that they have better numbers, or whatever. But there's always a fan or two that'll tell me, oh, he's going to be good next year, because they want to believe that, or because, well, Edgar's there now, so it's going to be good. And that's fine. I mean, fans can fan how they want. Well, what I like to be is rooted in fact and in data, so that it doesn't mean I'll be right, but at least it makes me consistent in where I'm coming from on things.
That's awesome. Luke, this has been really, really cool. Thanks so much for taking some time to talk Mariners with us. Again, we've followed you from afar forever, so to actually get to sit down and talk with you has been really fun. For everybody listening, if you want to check out Luke's work and you don't know him already, which you should, again, you can follow his newsletter, Mariners Consigliere. You can follow him on Twitter at Luke_Arkins. And thanks again, Luke. Hopefully we get a chance to talk again down the road. We enjoyed it.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
That was a really fun conversation with Luke Arkins. Again, if you guys are not already following him, go follow him on Twitter at Luke_Arkins. And go check out his newsletter, Mariners Consigliere. He really is awesome and knows his stuff extremely well. So we really appreciate all his time. TJ, as this episode comes out, again, it's getting released a day early. Usually we put these out on Wednesdays and Fridays. Last couple weeks it's been Tuesdays and Fridays because of the holiday. So as we put this out, year two of the Marine Layer Pod in the books, coming to a close. Doesn't really feel like it's been 2 years, I gotta be honest.
It has flown by. Yeah, very, very cliche thing to say. And as much as we did in year number one, in year number two, it was, as you would expect, a lot more. We had a lot more challenges this year that were interesting to come over, but I'm really proud of us. I'm proud of what resulted of this year, both good and bad, because we had to learn a lot, and we did things we had yet to do. We went traveling as a podcast for spring training, for the winter meetings, for the All-Star break. And it took the next level, and we saw the next level jump in viewership on YouTube. We saw it in downloads. We had big events during the season that really help us out that we're tasked to essentially cover now with this. It's our responsibility. When a manager gets fired in the middle of a season, hey, we're on it instantly. We need to have great stuff out as soon as humanly possible to make this thing work. So I'm proud of us, dog. Like we have had to do a lot this year, and we've made it through, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, I echo all of that. Well, maybe except the good and the bad. And I don't know how much bad we had. There was things you have to learn as you go to keep upping your content and make it as good as possible. I don't know if anything like bad happened. I don't know if I'd phrase it like that. Things you have to learn.
There was no bad result. There were things we have to get through this year.
Yeah. That
I'd say we learned from.
Yeah, that's fair. But I didn't want to pin that in like a funny way for people. It's like, oh, like what bad things happened to them this year? No, nothing like that. Just like as you continue to move through content and try and do more and more things and try and put out the best product possible, there's just things that you learn as a result of that and just work through. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And that's what we mean is just learning through doing new things, which we did in year 2 because we try to do a lot more. But yeah, like if you just want to list out some of the stuff we did, you mentioned the traveling. Obviously, we get the new cameras to really upgrade like our video quality on social media. I don't think in a million years when the two of us started this podcast, we thought we would get to host and fill in for the #1 sports show in the Pacific Northwest and do it multiple times over a stretch of a few months, which has been really cool, and doing Brock and Salk. So never in a million years did I think that was going to happen. So that's been a really cool thing that's happened. I'm just kind of listing out some of the stuff we've done, which has been, I'm with you. Like this stuff is really fun. It takes a lot of work, obviously, and we put all of that time in because we're passionate about it. And we think the community that we've built with this has been really, really cool. And our goal is to keep doing that, keep building on that, keep moving forward.
And getting to meet so many more of you guys this year, whether it be down at Winter Meetings. Shout out Henry, who cold emails us and sees if we're down at Winter Meetings and meet up, and it was great to meet Henry down there, and then all of you guys at the ballpark throughout the whole season. You can just see the growth of it, like the growth of the community is really the coolest thing for us to see. And again, as we say all the time, like that's why we do it, is to impact people and provide entertainment to people. And we're glad that it continues to resonate people here throughout a second season. And then, I want to pat ourselves on the back too, and some of the accomplishments we've had. We've had our #1 episode of all time this year. We're about to close out the year, I believe, on our best month listenership wise that we have had. So it's good that all of these things come together at the end of a second full year, where we have these accomplishments that we're so proud of. We have all of our listeners that we're also so proud of that have stuck with us through all this time. It really means a lot for two people who put all of this time and effort into this product to see the reward of it and the people and the achievements that we've had. It's awesome.
It's been really cool. We met a lot of people this year, which was so awesome. I would say that started to happen around spring training, which blows us away every single time. And it's the wildest thing. And it's sometimes you don't always know what to say, but it's nothing but like appreciation always. And I'll say the same thing I said at the end of last year. Genuinely, I hope to meet every single one of you that listens, follows, watches our stuff on social media at some point in time. Every single one. Because talking with all you guys when we have the chance to meet a bunch of you in person, it's a blast. And that's what we built this on, right? Like, that like for a long time, there was always this, not like in the Mariners world, just in sports media in general, there's a little bit of like a gap between media and fans. The old school media people are objective. They almost come at you with I know more because I'm in the position that I'm in and I'm around the team. Like, look, I think TJ and I know a lot of ball. I hope you guys feel the same way. Maybe not, or maybe you listen to just hear all the takes that we put out that you think are terrible, and that's fine too. But genuinely, like, the whole point behind this is we are in it with all of you guys. We are diehard fans like all of you guys. We go through the ups and downs of the season like all you guys, and hopefully we display a bunch of that. We hope to be informative too, but more than anything, like TJ said, we want to be entertaining. We want to be entertainers. We want to be fun, and we want to provide something that's different, and that's what we really strive to do, and it seems like that's really resonated with people. Why do you think I get so mad all the time on social media or on here? It's because I feel like any old other Mariners fan, when something happens that rubs you the wrong way or drives you crazy, you react in a certain way. So, like, I hope it's felt that way when we meet people in person, that like, yeah, there's no like divide. There's no gap. We're just fans like everybody else. And when we meet people, that's all we want to do is be fans with other fans and talk baseball with other Mariners fans. And that's what I think is cool about the community we built with this.
And to that, I raise a glass to year 3.
Let's do it.
Cheers, dog.
Year 3. I think we've got some more big ideas on the way in year 3. some things that we want to do that we hope to get out there. Man, I really hope we can get merch going this year. No promises, but we're working through it. Fingers crossed. It would be really cool. And some other things in store as well. So seriously, from both TJ and I, shout out to every single one of you guys. It has been a blast. It continues to be a blast. And we hope to keep moving forward with it. So, you got anything else? Or I just end it pretty well?
Looking forward to our next episode being in 2025.
Let's do it. On that note, that just about wraps up this edition of the Marine Layer Podcast. You guys know the drill. If you want to listen to the full form podcast, you can do so wherever you get your audio pods. If you're listening, make sure to download, make sure to rate and review, leave that 5-star review. It helps us out a ton. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and please hit that subscribe button. It really, really does help out the channel and helps out the two of us. You're supporting us big time if you hit subscribe on YouTube. On social media, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube Shorts, Blue Sky, at Marine Layer Pod. We're posting content every day. That's TJ. I'm Lyle. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.